Welcome to True Echo, where real voices rise, justice speaks, and the untold becomes unforgettable. Today's story is about a young black girl humiliated in public by a rich heir in a town ruled by silence, until her father, once a civil rights warrior, returned to the battlefield. What followed didn't just shake a community, it broke an empire. Stay with us because this isn't just about racism and power. It's about how one voice, when backed by courage, can make the world listen. It was a blistering Saturday afternoon in Redwood Falls, a town that looked perfect from the outside, white picket fences, clean streets, smiling faces. But beneath the surface it was rotting. Maya Brooks, 13 years old with skin like polished obsidian and eyes full of curiosity, stood at the strawberry stall in the middle of the farmer's market. Her family had only been in Redwood Falls for a week. Her parents, Elias and Sarah, had moved from the city to find peace and safety. That dream shattered in a single moment. Before she could pay, a rough hand clamped around her small wrist. "What the hell are you doing here, colored kid?" sneered Jed Clean, mid-20s, son of Richard Clean, the billionaire who practically owned Redwood Falls. Maya froze. His grip was bruising. Her head jerked around to see his smirk, his cold blue eyes, his entitled cruelty. "I'm buying strawberries," she said. "Let go of me." Jed wasn't used to being told no, especially not by a black girl. "You talking back?" he hissed. "You think you can just show up here like you belong?" He snatched her shopping bag, and when she pulled back, the thin cotton of her dress tore, ripping from her shoulder down to her ribs. Gasps spread like wildfire through the market. People looked, but no one stepped in. Jed sneered. "Next time, stay in the slums where you belong, savage." He shoved her. Maya stumbled backward, clutching the torn dress to her chest. Her dignity shredded. Her fury ignited. Two elderly women moved toward her. One wrapped a jacket around her trembling shoulders. The other knelt to gather her strawberries. She didn't cry. Not then. She took out her phone and called the one person she knew would never fail her. "Dad," she whispered, voice thick with fury. "He tore my dress. He called me a savage. His name is Jed Clean." Elias Brooks sat on the edge of their porch, phone clutched tightly in his hand. His breath caught in his throat as Maya's voice cracked through the line. Her pain, so raw, so real, stabbed through every layer of calm he had spent years perfecting. He had moved his family to Redwood Falls for peace. For healing. After 2 decades as a civil rights attorney in the city, Elias was exhausted. He had seen enough injustice to fill lifetimes. But this wasn't just another case. This was his daughter. "I'll be right there," he said, rising to his feet with a deadly calm. He drove like a storm was chasing him, because it was. But when he arrived at the market and saw Maya standing there, holding her ripped dress, face set in stone but eyes shimmering with fury, he didn't lose control. He wrapped her in his arms and said nothing. His silence was louder than rage. Sarah soon arrived, rushing toward them with their youngest son in tow. Her eyes widened as she saw Maya's condition. "Oh my God. Maya, baby, are you okay?" "I'm okay," Maya whispered. "But he has to pay." Elias didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His eyes had already hardened into something Maya had only seen in photographs of him at protests and courtrooms. That fire. That steel. Back at home, Maya changed clothes, her torn dress placed on the kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. She paced while Elias sat at his old desk, opening folders that hadn't been touched since their move. Dust from a past life was about to become a storm for the Clean family. "Dad," Maya said. "We can't let him get away with this. He didn't just hurt me. He humiliated me in front of everyone. They just watched. They were too scared to stop him." Elias looked up from a thick manila folder he had just pulled from a box labeled, "Archive, Injustice." It contained notes about Clean holdings, environmental violations, political corruption, and names of ruined people. Names like Marcus DeLay. "I know what kind of monsters they are," he said. "But monsters don't die easy." Sarah joined them in the room, her expression torn between fear and resolve. "We just got here. Elias, we came to this town to get away from all that." "I know," Elias said, closing his eyes. "But sometimes trouble finds you anyway. Especially when you're black in America." Maya clenched her fists. "Then let's not run anymore." It was then that Elias knew, this wasn't just about what happened to Maya. This was about legacy. About truth. About justice that had been ignored for too long. "I'll reach out to my old contacts," Elias said. "We'll start quietly. Build a case. Find others who've suffered under the Clean name. But Maya, if we do this, it'll be war. Maya looked him dead in the eyes. Good. That night, while Sarah sat rocking their son to sleep, Elias and Maya pored through records, digital archives and old news clippings. The Clean family had built their fortune on land grabs, silenced dissent with bribes, and buried scandals in backroom deals. But there was one name that stood out: Marcus DeLay. A decade ago, Marcus had fought back against the Clean Holdings land development that would have displaced dozens of families. Weeks later he was mugged in a suspiciously specific attack that left him in a wheelchair. No charges were ever filed. Maya found an old email address and sent a message. Hi Mr. DeLay. My name is Maya Brooks. I think the Clean family did to me what they did to you. I need your help. Please. There was no reply. Elias wasn't surprised. He's probably scared. They broke him. But Maya refused to believe that broken meant finished. The next morning Elias received a call from Richard Clean himself. The voice on the other end of the line was calm, too calm. Elias, Richard Clean drawled, smooth as polished glass. I heard there was a bit of tension at the market yesterday. Unfortunate business, really. I hope your daughter is all right. Elias's jaw tightened. She's fine. Thank you for your concern. Richard chuckled, low and cold. You know how kids are. Jed can be impulsive. He didn't mean anything by it, I'm sure. Just youthful misunderstanding. No need to let something so minor spiral, right? Elias said nothing. Richard's voice dipped an octave, polite but laced with something razor sharp. This is a small town, Elias. A peaceful one. People value harmony here. I'd hate to see things get out of hand. For your sake. For your family's sake. You understand me? Elias leaned back in his chair. Crystal clear. Good, Richard said, the smile audible in his tone. Let's keep things friendly. Welcome to Redwood Falls, Mr. Brooks. He hung up. Elias sat in silence, phone still at his ear. Then he stood and walked straight to the living room where Maya and Sarah waited. His face was unreadable, but Sarah saw the tension in his shoulders. They're trying to scare us, he said. Richard Clean called. He wants this swept under the rug. Maya stood up fast. Then we're making noise. I already started, Elias said. I reached out to an old friend in the city, Elena Rodriguez. Civil rights attorney. She's taken down men like Clean before. She's interested. But she wants evidence. Not just Jed's attack. She wants the full story. Sarah crossed her arms, her voice trembling. Elias, this town is theirs. The police, the mayor, even the local reporters. If we fight them, they'll fight back harder. I don't want Maya hurt again. Or you. I know, Elias said quietly. But what Jed did wasn't just a mistake. It was a message. If we do nothing, that message spreads. Maya's phone buzzed. A new email. From Marcus DeLay. Subject, I remember. Message. They destroyed my body but not my memory. If you're ready to fight, I'll stand with you. But only if you promise. No more silence. Maya gasped, tears prickling her eyes. She handed the phone to her father. Elias read the message, then nodded. Then it begins. Over the next week, Elias and Maya worked like a two-person task force. Marcus DeLay shared every document, every name, every shadowy detail of what Clean Holdings had done to him and to Redwood Falls. Maya collected testimonies, anonymous at first, from former Clean employees, residents whose property had been seized, families who had left town in fear. Sarah watched it all unfold with a quiet ache in her heart. She remembered Elias from the early days of their marriage, young, brilliant, burning with justice. But she also remembered the threats. The nights they moved apartments with no notice. The day someone slashed their car tires with a note taped to the windshield that read, "Know your place." Now her daughter was walking into that same fire. One evening, Maya came home from school with a bruised arm. Some kids shoved me, she said, trying to play it down. Said I was ruining everything here. Sarah's hands shook as she pressed ice to Maya's arm. This is exactly what I was afraid of. We're bringing too much attention. Elias knelt beside them. Then we keep going. Because the moment we stop, this never ends. The next day news broke. A flyer circulated online. Justice for Marcus. Justice for Maya. With side-by-side photos. Marcus DeLay, smiling in an old community photo, and then Marcus now in his wheelchair, pale and broken. And beside that, a photo of Maya's torn white dress, held up like evidence. The post went viral. Not just in Redwood Falls but beyond. More voices began speaking out. Anonymous videos. Whispers turning into outcries. A teacher who once lost her job for refusing to change a report on Jed's misconduct. A janitor who saw chemicals dumped near school grounds. A nurse who treated bruises but was warned not to file a report. Then came the leak. A former Clean Holdings accountant, unfairly dismissed, sent Elias a USB drive in a plain envelope. Inside, financial records, hidden transactions, bribes to city officials, forged environmental reports. Elias didn't smile. He just looked at Maya. We've got them. But Richard Clean wasn't done. 2 nights later, someone keyed the Brooks car and left a note. Drop this. Or else. Elias stood on his porch, staring at the scratched paint on his car. The note flapped in the early morning breeze like a threat whispered on paper. Drop this. Or else. He said nothing as Maya and Sarah joined him outside. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth when she saw the damage. Maya, still in her pajamas, reached for the crumpled paper. They're scared, she said, more calm than a teenager had any right to be. We hit something. Sarah turned to Elias, her voice barely above a whisper. How far are you willing to take this, Elias? Elias looked at his daughter. As far as it takes. That afternoon he made the call to Elena Rodriguez. The civil rights lawyer wasted no time. We'll file 2 suits. One against Jed Clean for assault and racial discrimination. Another against Clean Holdings itself, for corruption, environmental violations and civil rights abuses. But Elias, once we go public it's war. We're ready, Elias replied. Then gather the town. With Elena's help, Elias organized a community meeting at the old church hall. No official announcements. No press. Just flyers, quiet texts, whispers. That night, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, something happened that no one in Redwood Falls had seen in years. People showed up. Dozens. Then scores. Some came with folded arms and wary eyes. Others with tight-lipped fury. Many came with fear still clinging to their expressions. But they came. Elias stood at the front with Maya beside him. He spoke with the clarity of a man who had waited years for this moment. My daughter was attacked. My friend was crippled. But this story isn't just ours, it's all of yours. This town has been ruled by one family's shadow. It's time we shine a light. Maya stepped forward, holding up her torn dress, her voice clear and trembling. He ripped this in front of everyone. Not just the fabric, but what it meant to be safe, to be a child, to be respected. I won't let it be forgotten. You shouldn't either. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Then silence. Elias displayed a screen. A slideshow began, images of Marcus Delay before and after. Testimony snippets. Photos of polluted creek beds. Stolen land deeds. Falsified audit reports from the USB. Then came the unexpected. An elderly woman in the back raised her hand. My son worked for Clean Holdings. He told me once they were dumping toxic waste into the river at night. He wanted to speak up. Then his contract was suddenly terminated. Another man stepped forward. They ruined my cousin's trucking business when he refused to sell them land. No one believed him. One by one the town began to speak. A dam had broken. When the meeting ended, Elias handed out flyers with links to the petition and QR codes for video testimonies. Maya posted it all under a new account, Justice for Marcus and Maya. Within hours, the videos were being shared far beyond Redwood Falls. And Richard Clean noticed. 2 days later, a sharply dressed lawyer showed up at the Brooks doorstep. Mr. Brooks, I represent Clean Holdings. My client is prepared to offer a settlement. A large one. In exchange for silence. Elias didn't even let him finish. Tell Richard this, our silence isn't for sale. As the lawsuit paperwork was filed and served, national attention began to turn. Maya's torn dress became a symbol. Marcus's wheelchair a rallying cry. Journalists from state and even national news outlets reached out. Maya was interviewed. Elias gave statements. Sarah, hesitant at first, finally stepped up in support. We didn't ask to lead this. But we're not backing down. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Richard Clean panicked. He began pulling strings, calling in favors with judges, reporters, political allies. He spread rumors that Elias was an outside agitator, Maya a troublemaking brat. Jed even filmed a video apology full of forced tears and fake humility. But it was too late. Elias had already partnered with an independent forensic analyst. The USB was real. The evidence solid. The Clean empire had been cracked. And the trial was coming. The courtroom filled within minutes on the day of the hearing. Elias sat beside Elena, Maya between them, her chin lifted high. Across the aisle, Richard Clean and his son Jed flanked a row of high-powered attorneys, smug and polished. The judge entered. All rise. It was time. The courtroom buzzed with tension, every seat filled, every eye locked on the front. Redwood Falls had never seen anything like this. Town officials, community members, reporters from major networks, even a few quietly terrified ex-employees of Clean Holdings lined the wooden pews. Jed Clean sat stiffly in a navy suit that couldn't hide the smirk tugging at his lips. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, but Jed wasn't worried. To him, this was just a formality, another mess that Daddy would clean up like always. Then Maya walked in. 13 years old, shoulders square, head high. She wore a simple blue dress and carried the ripped white one in a sealed evidence bag. The room shifted. The smirk fell from Jed's face. Elena Rodriguez opened with precision. She introduced the case as not just an assault, but a public, racially motivated attack, committed in broad daylight by the privileged son of a powerful man. Then came the exhibits. The dress, photographs, video footage, eyewitness statements. But it was Maya's testimony that held the room by the throat. She stood in the witness box, voice steady but full of emotion. "I didn't even know his name," she said, eyes fixed on Jed. "I was just buying strawberries. He grabbed me, yelled at me, said I didn't belong here. He tore my dress. People watched. They didn't stop him. Because they were afraid. I was afraid too. But not anymore." Gasp. A few people wiped their eyes. When Jed's attorney cross-examined her, trying to twist her words, implying maybe she had misunderstood the situation, Maya didn't flinch. "No," she said. "I know what hate looks like. I know what being looked at like I'm less than human feels like. He didn't just tear my dress. He tried to tear down who I am." Elias watched from the gallery, pride and sorrow burning in his chest. Maya wasn't just telling her story, she was telling everyone's. Then Marcus DeLay was wheeled into the room. The frail man had aged decades in a few short years. His voice was weak, halting, but every word hit like a hammer. "I was a youth counselor," Marcus said. "Tried to stop Clean Holdings from building on sacred burial land. They warned me. Then they beat me. They paid the cops to ignore it. Paid the papers to bury it. I lost everything." The courtroom held its breath. "But I'm here," Marcus said. "And I'm not afraid anymore." He looked at Maya. "Because of her." The Clean family's defense tried everything. They claimed Marcus was lying. That Maya had exaggerated. That Jed had no intent to harm, that it was just a scuffle. But then Elena presented the USB. On a large screen, page after page of illegal payments, fake permits, bribes, and internal emails flashed across the courtroom. Environmental violations. Forged contracts. Manipulated audits. Even messages between Richard Clean and a former city inspector, clearly coordinating to shut down whistleblowers. The room exploded in whispers. Then Elena dropped the final bomb. A deposition from the accountant who leaked the USB. Recorded on video. He detailed how Clean Holdings had funneled hush money through shell accounts to silence victims, including a prior settlement with a family whose son was accidentally injured by Jed in another town. The judge called a recess. Reporters dashed outside. The Clean name, once untouchable, was bleeding. Outside the courthouse, a growing crowd gathered. Some held signs. "Justice for Maya. Marcus still stands. End the silence in Redwood Falls." Inside, Richard Clean sat pale and trembling. For the first time, he looked like a man losing control. Back at home that evening, Maya sat on the porch beside her father. "You think we did enough?" she asked. Elias put an arm around her. "We spoke the truth. That's more than most ever get to do. But will they listen?" "They already are," Elias said. "And tomorrow we finish it." The final day of the trial arrived like a storm. The courtroom was packed tighter than ever. Reporters with cameras waited outside. Federal investigators sat near the back now, quietly observing. Redwood Falls had gone from sleepy town to ground zero in a battle between power and justice. Jed Clean no longer smirked. He slouched in his chair, eyes darting, fingers twitching. His confidence had bled dry after Maya's testimony went viral overnight. Millions had viewed her clip online. The torn dress, her voice, raw, young, unwavering, captured hearts across the country. Even national news anchors were calling her a modern Rosa Parks in a sundress. Elena Rodriguez delivered her closing argument with fire and clarity. "This case is not just about a torn dress. This is about what that tear represents. Power abused. Silence enforced. Fear weaponized. This child, this girl, stood in the center of a town designed to ignore her pain, and she said, No more. She pointed to Marcus in his wheelchair. They tried to silence him. Tried to break him. But he stood again for her. For all of you. Because justice is not a favor. It is a right. The jury deliberated only 6 hours. When they returned, the entire courtroom stood. The forewoman, a local schoolteacher, read the verdict. On the charge of assault, guilty. On the charge of racial discrimination, guilty. A loud gasp echoed. Jed Clean's mother collapsed into tears. Jed himself went sheet white, lips trembling as the judge continued. For these crimes, Jed Clean is hereby sentenced to 5 years in state prison, with no possibility of early parole. The room was silent. Then the applause broke out, not from Maya's family but from the crowd. A wave of it. People stood. Some cried. Others clapped through tears. Marcus bowed his head and wept quietly. But the trial had only been part of the war. Within a week of the verdict, federal agencies launched a formal investigation into Clean Holdings, based on the evidence Elias and Elena had provided. What they uncovered was worse than anyone expected. Decades of financial fraud and tax evasion. Bribery of public officials. Dumping of toxic waste into Redwood Creek. Illegal property seizures and forged deeds. The media frenzy exploded. Clean Holdings stock plummeted. Their board of directors resigned en masse. Protesters camped outside their headquarters in 2 cities. Several local politicians were arrested. Richard Clean was subpoenaed for federal testimony. He never showed. Instead, Richard Clean fled the country on a private jet bound for Dubai. But international warrants soon followed. The empire collapsed. The once dominant family name that had ruled Redwood Falls like royalty was now the subject of criminal documentaries. Jed's mugshot became a symbol of entitlement brought to justice. And Maya? She didn't go back to the farmer's market for a while. Not because she was afraid, but because she didn't need to prove anything anymore. Redwood Falls changed. Whispers became voices. Silence became protest. The community held its first town forum in decades to address racial equity and environmental justice. Elias was invited to chair the board. He declined. Instead, he suggested someone else. Let Maya speak, he told them. It's her town now too. That spring, Maya stood on the same stage where she'd once been humiliated. She wore a brand new white dress. We can't erase the past, she said. But we can build something new. This town is not just for the powerful anymore. It's for everyone. The crowd roared with approval. Sarah stood beside Elias, her hand in his, tears in her eyes. We came here for peace, she whispered. And we found justice, Elias replied. Months passed. Spring bled into summer. Redwood Falls, once a symbol of silent injustice, transformed. The Clean estate was auctioned off. Its towering gates removed. The name Clean Park was changed to DeLay Green, in honor of Marcus DeLay, who now oversaw youth mentoring programs from his wheelchair. Children played beneath murals that told a new story, not one of dominance but of resistance and renewal. Elias was approached by law schools and nonprofits alike. They wanted his story, his voice. But he declined most of them. Instead, he taught free legal workshops on weekends at the community center. He wasn't chasing the spotlight. He was building something better. Maya, now 14, had become a reluctant symbol. News networks asked for interviews. Universities invited her to speak. But she kept most of it at arm's length. She hadn't done it for fame. She'd done it because she'd had no choice. Still, something in her had changed. One Saturday afternoon, as she walked through the now bustling farmer's market, several people waved, smiled. Vendors she hadn't dared return to gave her free samples, shy compliments, and in one case a strawberry pie for being brave. She passed the stall where her nightmare had begun. It had a new owner now, a woman with kind eyes and a sign that read, "This space stands against hate." Maya paused, took a breath, then smiled. Later that evening at home, she found Elias out on the porch, flipping through old case files one last time before locking them away. "Dad," she said, sitting beside him, "do you think it's really over?" Elias looked out at the town, now so different from when they'd first arrived. "Nothing's ever really over, Maya. But it's better now. Because of you." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Because of us." Sarah stepped out with lemonade and joined them. The three sat in the golden wash of sunset, the cicadas humming softly in the trees, no words needing to be spoken. A town that once looked away had finally learned to look inward. Marcus DeLay visited often. He spoke to high school students, sharing what it meant to stand up when it would have been easier to sit down. He never fully regained his health, but he walked again, with help. And more importantly, he walked tall. Clean Holdings, once a financial juggernaut, was broken into pieces. Several of its senior members served time. The state launched an initiative requiring transparency for corporate land use, inspired by the Redwood Falls case. And as for Jed Clean, he served every day of his sentence. No early release. No special treatment. When he left prison, the world had moved on without him. Maya's torn dress, carefully preserved, was donated to a civil rights exhibit, displayed beside her photo and a small plaque that read, "She was 13. And she didn't back down." True Echo later covered the story in a documentary special, inspiring other small towns to confront their own unspoken injustices. People began sharing similar stories. A movement had started, not loud but persistent. Back on that same porch, Maya picked up a pen and began writing in a journal. Her first words? "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." In a town where silence had always served the powerful, it took the voice of a 13-year-old black girl and the fire of her father's love to ignite a revolution. This wasn't just a story of justice, it was a reminder that power does not belong to the few who take it, but to the many who dare to speak up. As Maya wrote, "This isn't the end. It's just the beginning." If this story moved you, if it reminded you of the power within every voice, especially the ones we're told don't matter, then help us keep that echo alive. Subscribe to True Echo for more stories that reveal, inspire, and remind us of who we can be. Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you believe in justice, don't stay silent. Share this story.